Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know that we've got people joining us both from live streaming, but also people that are joining us through the session. So welcome, everyone. I want to really get started with a really kind of quick interactive exercise. It would be great for me to know who's in the room and also for you to get to know each other better. So I know that most of you are on your computers. If you can go to www.menti.com and then use this code 7221-4533, and then you'll see this question pop up. And please let me know, who are you? Where are you joining from? Are you representing a social enterprise? Are you someone that works in an accelerator? Are you from a funder or an investor or a nonprofit or someone else? So we would love for you to come and contribute and let us know. And the numbers will kind of update as you do that. Okay, so we've got one nonprofit among us. This is actually kind of very fun little exercise, and we can see the updates live. Don't be shy. Let's see where the rest of you are from. So it's super easy. It's menti.com, and then you can just enter the number. So we've got one accelerator and one nonprofit. Okay, so we've got entrepreneurs. And also, thank you, Najima, for kicking us off and saying, I'm an entrepreneur, Najima from Uganda. So you can also kind of put it on the chat. But meanwhile, I know that we've got quite a few people on the call, so I'll just wait a couple of more minutes. Two accelerators, very exciting. And I know people are both trickling into the call. Okay, so that's really great to see that we've got a big representation from accelerators on the call, because I think a lot of the conversation that we'll have today is around how we can make more inclusive programming around founders that accelerators can use. So we've got Belinda from Ongoza. That's fantastic. I know your work, Belinda, and I used to know Alexi, so it's really great. And thank you, Maureen, so much for putting the information on the chat as well. We've got 10 responses. Okay. And entrepreneurs and mixed nonprofit and entrepreneur. I know that sometimes it's hard to categorize yourself, but let's try something else. So I know that there's a few entrepreneurs in the room, but there's some that I would love for you to answer this question as an accelerator as well. How do you feel about meeting and pitching investors? As accelerators, how do you feel about working on this particular aspect with your entrepreneurs? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or you just do it? Okay, we've got a love. That's fantastic. Hi, Martin. Hi, Josephine. Hi, Dora. Don't know yet. Okay, so there's some people that are just starting on this journey. Okay, that's so interesting. We've got the two polarized, but some people just go ahead and they do it. This is really great because we're kind of going to be digging and really talking about the ups and the downs of pitching and particularly answering investor questions today. All right, it's a bit intimidating, Dora says, so please keep using the chat. It's a great way to kind of engage everyone in the conversation. Okay, so if this is the first time you use Mentimeter, thank you. It's actually, I love it because it's just such a fun way to, and I'm going to resume share. And can I hear from Maureen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Martin, yeah, potentially nerve-wracking, and ditto. So it seems like there's some consensus, you know, that when you go in front of investors and you put yourself out there in almost a line of fire, when you get a lot of questions and people are trying to poke holes into what you're doing, oh, you can see the Mentimeter. Okay, so let me stop. And then I'm going to start sharing again. How are you doing now?
Great, we can see your presentation now.
Perfect, I appreciate it. And I'm going to keep the chat going because I really like reading what you guys are saying. So let me tell you a little bit about me. Up until last week, I was running an accelerator at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and it was called the Scale Up Fellowship. And I got to work with entrepreneurs all around the world, and it really helped them grow their businesses and get more funding, particularly. And now I work for ICRW Advisors, and particularly working on helping nonprofits, corporations, and other programs become more gender inclusive. So a lot of my work, both with MIT and now my current job with ICRW, has been thinking about how to make processes more inclusive for female founders. And so a lot of the work and the research that I've been doing over the past couple of years is going to be shared with you today. If you're an accelerator that's on this call, or if you're a male entrepreneur, I think this is still so relevant because investors have so many biases that they might not even know when they speak with you. And so whether you're an accelerator that's supporting entrepreneurs or whether you are a male entrepreneur, it's always really good to kind of think about these biases and how they might apply to you. And I think particularly for entrepreneurs that come from emerging markets, from Africa, India, and other places, a lot of this is quite relevant as well because of how investors are. So let's start a little bit with the big picture. So I want to hear from you, and if anyone actually wants to go off mute and tell me a little bit, have you heard of the gender financing gap, and what's that all about? And thanks, Nina. Yes, biases, they can be conscious or not. So does anyone, you can even add it in chat. What is this gender financing gap? Have you heard about it before? I'm sure. Yeah.
Can I answer?
Yes,
Hi.
please. Then say your name and your organization, and I'd love for you to answer.
Oh, okay, my name is Gail from South Africa. Okay, I'm not sure, but I'm just guessing because I've heard it there and there. I think it has to do with most of the time fundings come out and let's say it's more for women than for men. So I think it comes from that, and I'm not sure whether it's a good thing or it's a bad thing.
Thank you. And that's so insightful to kind of, and I think you're definitely kind of on the right track. And I like how you opened it with that. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And that's, I think, something we will discuss today. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, Najima, did you raise your hand if you want to go and share as well?
Yes, gender finance. I think from my experience, it's when, and I think I've experienced it before, but you go and you're trying to raise money and you're told, one, based on the industry you're in and the fact that you're a woman, we just don't think we're able to fund you. So it's something that I've faced quite a number of times, whereby the fact that I'm a woman limits me from getting financing. And then when a man goes with the same proposal, it's instantly funded. So I think that's what it is.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for tying it also with personal experience, right? Because we hear about these terms abstract, but if you're an entrepreneur, you experience them on a day-to-day. So I'm going to take one more comment. Belinda, please, and Martin and Nina, please keep, I just love the engagement both on chat. And so, but Belinda, I want to invite you, if you can come off speaker and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Jonah. Yes, I want to piggyback on what Najima said. From what I understand, the gender gap is women are seen as riskier investments. And so they are discriminated upon when it comes to, lending or anything of that sort, because of basically we are considered not earning more than men, or understand the investments world and the process around it, or we may not understand how to use the facility, or even afford to pay the facility. So yeah, we are considered, as women, we are considered riskier investments. And so we don't usually get as much access to finance as men do.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there are some definite keywords that I want to pick out from your answer. The fact that women are considered riskier, and then also the consequences, right? Is that, and I think that this is really like the things that has been coming out when you start looking at the global data flows. Men and companies and startups that have at least one male co-founder get about 88% of venture capital finance. Whereas if you're only one female founder or a female founding team, you get about 2%. And if you are a woman that also has a male co-founder, you get about 11%. So this is something that is quite, it's big globally, right? So IFC took a look and they actually saw that if you count the funding gap between women-led businesses that are formal across globally, that is about 300 billion, a huge number. And this is one of the biggest, most persistent challenges with venture finance is how can we really bridge this gap? How can we make sure that women entrepreneurs, but also entrepreneurs from emerging markets, from local markets are getting money? I'm talking about women because this is where a lot of my research has been focused. But if you actually take it and look at local founders and others, then you can see that some of these challenges, some of these funding gaps are quite persistent. But when it comes to women, the data says that about 70% of women businesses are undercapitalized. And what that means, if you don't have the money, then you're growing slower, you're hiring slower, and your businesses have less of an impact. So it matters, and it matters a lot. So now I'm going to share with you a really interesting study that really kind of like looks into this. As I mentioned, I'm from an accelerator program. And so I was really curious, well, how can accelerators and the accelerators that we have on the call, I'm sure, ask themselves this question as well as, well, how can we be a bridge? If this is such a big problem globally, how can we as accelerators, as connectors between the entrepreneur and the people that are holding the money, the investors, how can we bridge and how can we make it better for underrepresented founders, for female founders? And so the World Bank, IFC, and also Village Capital put together this big data set about, well, are accelerators helping? And so what they did is that they took female founders and they took male founders, and this was a really interesting baseline because they were accepted to the same accelerator, which meant that the women businesses were just as strong as the men businesses. So you couldn't really attribute the lack of funding to the quality of the enterprises. Very often people are dismissive of this gender gap and they say, well, female businesses aren't quite there yet, they need more. But with this accelerator, it was a closed experiment. And what they found out is that at the end of the accelerator, men had over $100,000 that they had fundraised, and women had about 47, so about half of that. So again, this to me validated the gender financing gap. But the thing that was really interesting, take a look at this graph, was that when men and women entered the accelerator, men already had an advantage over women. So women had about $25,000 and men had about $45,000. But what ended up happening is after they got the same training, after they got connected to the same investors, after they got really trained, upskilled, everything that these accelerators were supposed to do, the gap just got bigger. Instead of seeing the two lines, well, men have more and women have less, but accelerators helping bridge that gap and making those lines come closer, actually, men in the beginning, they had about 1.6 time advantage over women. By the end of the training, they had a 2.1 time advantage. So this to me was huge, because we're training, we're spending money on programs to help all founders achieve, but the programs that we're building are helping men more than women. And so there's something we need to fix as intermediaries, something that we need to fix to actually make funding quite equitable and work for women. So the thing that I've been spending and that we will really talk about today is, if we're doing these one size fits all programs, then we might be actually helping men more than women, because the programs are designed for a generic entrepreneur, and women are having, even though they're interacting with the same investors, with the same institutions, etc., their experience might be different. And as long as we're training for the male experience, where they might be encountering less bias, less barriers, we're actually not doing a service to the female entrepreneurs. So I think what we're really going to dig in today is, for the entrepreneurs, we're going to think about, well, if you're encountering bias in the Q&A process when you talk to investors, what can you do about it? And if you're an accelerator or a nonprofit in the call, you can reflect on, well, how can I adopt this kind of mindset and kind of programming to make my work be more open, not just to work better for men, but I said work better for everyone, including women. Now I'm going to open it up to another question, because you know the reality on the ground. So what are these unique challenges and barriers that women really experience along their fundraising journey, whether it's when they meet investors in due diligence and negotiating? It's a long journey, and that's why I kind of showed it here as a journey. And some of you already mentioned some of these when we talked about the gender financing gap, but I'd love to hear from a couple of people on the call. What are your reflections on this study that I just shared? And what do you think are those things that we really need to think about? What are those unique barriers that women face that then we need to really begin to tackle as an ecosystem together, so we can equalize the funding flows? And you can just get off mute and jump in, or you can raise your hand and then.
Hello.
Yes.
Gail again.
Hi, Gail. Please.
Yes. From what you just shared, I found it very, very interesting and very intriguing. And the reason I'm saying this, sorry about that, I'm saying this is because one thing I've learned, or rather observed, is that many women, if they are well trained, I believe there's so much they can actually produce. Women are helpers, and whenever you give them something, they want to reproduce it. That's why in most instances, or many times, in as much as people, believe that women are spenders and all that, but also they are good in terms of managing even finances, and they know what is needed, what to buy, and how this will help, and things like that. So I just think what the gap here is getting good training, because as you showed, even with that graph, the graph, after the training took place, that is when, the arrow went up, it shooted up because of what, after that training. But before, it was estimated that, okay, they are lower than the men. So I think it has to do with training. And in that way, I think both will balance and both will be able to to share different weaknesses and strengths, because maybe what is our strength as women may be weaknesses for the men, and what is their strength may be weaknesses for us. And in that way, we are able to balance, instead of just assuming that our women cannot handle this. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting guidance and being equipped well, and in that way we'll be able to grow and become better in whatever it is that we are given at hand. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think you made some really strong points, right? Like, first of all is you need to do training, but then the other is you need to do training to really emphasize women's strengths, and figure out how we can project those even more. Because sometimes, for example, just to continue building on what you were talking about, Kale, is that a lot of entrepreneurship is associated with for example, male leadership, or doctors. There are certain professions that when we think of that profession, we think of the stereotypical male. So how do we really make entrepreneurship really emphasize traits that women have too? So I think that your comments kind of really speak to that, and a lot of the research. So I have two more hands, two people that I want to call. So first Najima, and then after that, I'll have it over to you, Belinda. And then yeah.
I think for women, and I think this is just a perception that people have, and the idea is, because from my experience when I was employed, I remember what would happen is all these networking sessions would consistently be in the evening, late in the evening. I'm talking about from 9 in the night or from 10 in the night. Now you're going to find a situation whereby this woman is a mother, has to go back home, take care of her kids, so she's going to miss out on that. So what that will do to the men, they already have a head start. They've met like 20 people. The woman has to wait tomorrow to start meeting other people. While she's meeting other people, the man has met like 50, she's just meeting 10, and that increases their chances. So the environment and the work environment doesn't really favor women that much. And also the other aspect is, general investors tend to look at a woman, they're like, okay, now we're going to give her money, then she's going to start working, then 1 year down the road she wants to have babies, then she wants to take a break, then she's not here anymore. Then that is just the perception. Yet in actual sense, the way women built, we are built to multitask. I mean, I can be home and I'm working and I'm taking, and you can do so many things and do all of them well. But the thinking is, no, you put money in a woman, it's actually going to go down the drain, because sooner or later she's going to quit because of one reason or the other. And I feel that is consistently creating this barrier. I remember there's a time when I was employed, I took, when I gave birth, I had maternity leave, which was literally only 3 weeks. I'm talking about 1, 2, 3 weeks. When I came back, they'd already found someone else to fill the role. And the assumption was, now you see, now that you have a baby, we know things are going to change. So we had to just bring in someone just in case. And I was like, really, seriously? And it's that kind of thinking that made me, you know what, let me go out there, let me become an entrepreneur, and let me give women a fair shot, because I actually feel like they're not being given a fair shot. It doesn't mean that because you're going to carry a life, you're going to have babies, it doesn't mean you cannot do what the man does. So the environment needs to just be fair. What we do actually at my company, we actually have a place where women can actually go breastfeed their kids, where but if you've just given birth and you're not comfortable leaving your child home, you can just bring your child to work. And so we are creating this environment that makes them feel like, you know what, you have a fair advantage, which I feel like is still lacking in most places. Investors look at women as they're just going to squander the money. They have no clue. And first of all, they'll work for 1 year and stop, which is not the truth. So we just need to find a way of changing how people look and perceive women. We are not as clueless as they actually think we are, you know? So yeah, so I'm talking from my experiences. You're going to, excuse me, I'll keep on referring a lot because it's something I've gone through for a really, really long time. And it's something that I'm so passionate about and I want to change because I feel like it's gone on for way too long. It's about time that women were given their due respect. What a man can do, a woman can do. I run a factory and actually 80% of the workers are women. They're running machines, you know, they're running, they're packing, and it's amazing at what they can actually do.
That's
they're
so
engineers. So yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And I think that definitely the biases that you mentioned, like the maternity bias, is one of the huge ones, right? It's a perception and there are barriers, but sometimes assistants perpetuate those. So thank you. That's excellent. I'll pass it on to Belinda as well, because I know you've had your hand up, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on these unique challenges and barriers that women face.
Thank you so much, Jonah. So some of the challenges also I can think about have been touched here and there by the other two speakers, but some of them that also pop in my mind is a lot of, you'd find maybe a lot of SMEs are not properly formalized in terms of their businesses. So this hinders them to access finance. So accelerators could play a role here with capacity building in what exactly entails formalizing a business, the benefits of it, and also due diligence, documentation, and just about the facts that they need to have, and also just a little bit training in what is it called, networking abilities or negotiating abilities, abilities to approach a funder or an investor and be able to pitch their company confidently, because this is, I find men really thrive in putting themselves out there so much. In fact, there was a study a while back about when women and men are looking at an interview or a JD for a job on LinkedIn, men are more likely to just apply for the job, whether or not they, qualify for all. And women are more likely to go through every single line of that job application and and disqualify for themselves, because maybe they don't qualify for half of the things, yet men do. So I find men, I don't know where they get it, but they really just push themselves until they get funding. So this is something that we could also train our fellow women in how to just position themselves for better and their companies.
Those are two super powerful points, Belinda. One is, and the first one I think was something that Ivan also mentioned in the comment, is that they fail to access financing because they don't have assets. And then so sort of like you start off earlier with not that many assets, and then it kind of compounds over time. And then this other thing about it's called the confidence gap. And I think also Kojo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, mentioned, which is like, are men more confident and do women take more risks? I think when we dig into the second part of the exercise that we'll do is that perhaps, the data is really inconclusive about, why do men seem to have so much confidence and women seem to be, but sometimes it's the environment, sometimes you become more risk-taking if the environment puts it upon you and penalizes you more when you take more risks. And I think that there's studies that show over and over again that maybe a woman doesn't put herself forward in promotions in the study that you said, Belinda, because through the years they've been taught that it's not appropriate for women to speak out, to ask, to demand, or to so how do those norms, how do those things really get compounded over time? I think these are the things that we try to really unpack and think about, well, what kind of programming can we build if those are the realities? So I think those are such excellent points. I want to point out a couple of things that were written on the chat that are super good. Nina, the fact that people financing are men, over 95 of VCs are men, and men relate better to other men. It's called homophily. You just are connected to people that look like you, that have your same skin color, that sometimes have the same educational background, that come from the same ethnic group, speak the same language, etc., and are the same gender. And if those cycles can perpetuate each other, and this is a challenge that we need to break. Negotiation, helping women negotiate, getting them in right on the front people. Sometimes network access is a challenge. Risk aversion, thank you, Milton. Gender biased networking, Martin mentioned that. Particularly if most VCs are men and women don't have quite as easy access to these like all male networks. So how do we really do accelerator programs that actually push women and successfully integrate them into networks. Elizabeth also says, this is a very good point, that if you're a woman, but you are negotiating and you seem to be aggressive, this might be normal for men, but when women do it, they are penalized because it's seen that women are transgressing gender norms, that they're supposed to be nice, likable, communal, open, etc. So you guys are just providing such great comments, and keep putting them. I don't have, I'm not going to read through all of them, but I will definitely save the chat because your comments are fantastic. Okay, so what we've discussed so far is that there's a big gender gap. And then we've also discussed that accelerators aren't helping so much because they're just doing normal trainings for both men and women. And the things that they're not embedding into their programs are these things that we were just discussing. The fact that women negotiate differently. Women have different networks, that investors are biased towards women. So do accelerator programs teach us about how, if you're a woman entrepreneur and someone is biased towards you, how you can overcome and how you can really drive defensively when you encounter these challenges. So in the next part of our time together, I want to tell you and have us practice together, particularly when it comes to encountering investor questions that might be biased, what we can do, both as accelerators and as female founders, but even as founders that come from places where investors perceive you to be a big risk, how we can really take control of the situation. So I want to introduce you to two other people that have done such excellent work, research in this. It's Laura Wang from Harvard and Dana Kens from London Business School. So they also took a bunch of about a couple of thousand entrepreneurs and tracked them for over 2 years and looked at, when they met with investors, what was happening to those conversations and what was happening with the funding. So this is what they studied. So they had about, I was mistaken about the number. So they had about 200 founders, and 12% of them were women, and about 140 VCs, and about almost half of the VCs were women. So what happened? Very not surprising, because we already talked about the gender financing gap, but the men in the group raised about 5 times more money than the women in the group. So again, they looked at what was happening in these conversations between the investors and the male and the female entrepreneurs that was making the male entrepreneurs get so much more money than women. And I think the answer might surprise you. They found out that investors, after you finish your pitch and you've shown your company, you've really practiced it, but now it's time for the Q&A. That investors tend to ask 2 types of questions: promotion questions or prevention questions. And all of the questions that you will get as an entrepreneur can be classified into these 2 groups. And promotion questions, does anyone know the study? So I'm going to turn it over to you. Does someone know what a promotion question is or what a prevention question is? And it's okay. It's a study that has come out really recently. So a promotion question is when the investor asks you, what's your big vision? How are you going to grow this company? How are you going to succeed in this market and really make a lot of money for me? What are your big goals, big vision, big aspirations? And this is very important because investors want to know if your company is going to get big, because that's what investors do. They bet on companies getting big. So they want to know, they try to assess whether your company is going to grow exponentially and whether your company is going to be one of those companies that wins in their portfolio. The second type of question is about risk, and these are called prevention questions. So this is about, well, how can you fail? What can go wrong? What are the challenges that you're likely to encounter. So this is when the investor in his head is trying, or her, right? The investor can be male or female. They're trying to think, is this business going to make it, or is this business going to fail? So that's the difference between these two kinds of questions. And to tell you, as an entrepreneur, you will get both of these types of questions. And in every Q&A session, you will get some promotion and some prevention. But what these two amazing ladies, Dana and Laura, found out when they really broke down the interview transcripts was that they found out that women were getting prevention questions 2 times more than men. So investors probably were doing this unconsciously, but they were asking men, are you going to win big? And they were asking women, how are you going to fail? Can we talk about how you're going to fail? And so what ended up happening was that the conversations around women would focus around failure, and they became a self-perpetuating cycle. And the conversations with men turned out to be about winning, and that turned out in a self-perpetuating cycle. So what ended up happening was that investors would come out of the meeting and they would think about winning when it came to the conversations that they had with mostly the men, and they would come away thinking about, well, this business has 20, I have evidence of all these 20 ways and 20 challenges that this business had when they were talking to women. So these cycles, people don't really look at what the questioning part looks like, but it was very strong evidence that once you go down with prevention questions, you're not likely to get money. And once you go down with promotion questions, you're likely to get money. So how do we flip this dynamic? So first of all, I want to clarify a little bit more about what this looks like. So let's say the investor is asking you about the team, because all investors are always want to know about the team. So there's 2 ways that the investor can ask you about the team. They can say, what skills and expertise does your leadership team have that makes you stand out? Or they can say, what skill or expertise does your leadership team lack? What are you missing? What are you trying to build? So if you are lucky and you get a promotion questions, then you get to talk about all the awesome things in your team. But if you get a prevention question, then you talk about all of the gaps in your team. So you can imagine what the end result of that conversation is. Let me give you another example. Market opportunity. Again, the good thing about investor questions is that they're predictable. As an entrepreneur, you can download lists. They will always ask you about market opportunity. If an investor asks you a promotion question, they say, how big can this market get? What's the total addressable market? What is it going to look like in the future? Whereas if they're asking a prevention question, they say, the market is getting crowded. How can you differentiate yourself? Again, you could see that those 2, even though they're both asking about market opportunity, they'll take you into 2 very, very different directions. Another one about sales and margins. So if they want to know about your business, how are you going to monetize your business? How are you going to make money? And another question is, how long is it going to take you to break even? How much are you going to be struggling to make money until? So these are the 2 types of questions. I hope you have some clarity, and I can try to share this PowerPoint with you afterwards as well. But depending on where investors go with that question, that's where the conversation will end up. And that's the perception that they will have at the end. And promotion questions are about getting big, but prevention questions aren't always about risks. Sometimes they're just about the current state of your company, and that's limiting too. And I want you to understand that, because it's very important. If you're just talking about what you're doing now, you're not selling, you're not playing to what the investors really care about, which is this big win, right? So the less you talk about big wins, the less you're kind of getting to that part where investors really want to play. So this is the result. The people that got promotion questions it really, in the investor's head, it reinforces associations that these are people that have a big ambition. These are driven entrepreneurs. These are the ones that are gonna, go and take over the world, and you win, right? And you get investment 5 times more. Whereas if you get prevention questions, then you get stuck in the association between challenge, risk, caution. You become a risk taker. You are seen as a risk taker. We just talked about that, right? It's like, why do men seem confident, and why do women seem like they're risk averse? Well, maybe it's because we ask them different questions. We ask men about how confident we are, and we ask women about what are the challenges that they're facing. So maybe it's not about who they are, but maybe it's about how we frame the questions as investors. So that's what happens. You fall if you get prevention questions, and you rise if you get promotion questions. And this is a super important study. And so what we're going to do today is, well, so the thing that I was going to say is that this is the result. What does 5 times more look like in this group of 200 founders is $7.35 million. That's a lot. So this is why the financing gap keeps getting bigger. But if you can flip it, if you take a prevention question and you know what it is, and then you begin to answer that with a promotion answer, then investors don't seem to mind. Investors aren't kind of thrown off by that. So this is one small thing that you can do as an entrepreneur, or this is one thing that you can do as an accelerator, is to help your entrepreneurs become aware of how to answer questions, understand what type of questions they're facing, and then practice. And practice makes perfect. This is a skill. This is a muscle we have to. No one is born knowing how to answer investor questions. In fact, most of us are very, very bad at it, but it's something that we practice. And if we can practice not just answers, but actually this subtle flip, we can really see results. And this was also replicated in a lab. So it's been done twice, and over they showed that if you can master this skill, then you might be able to do a lot. So I'm going to introduce to you a framework. We're going to practice in small teams, and then we're also going to debrief. I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of like practice of what this would look like. So how do we do it? How do we practice these questions when we get these prevention questions? So the first thing when an investor asks, I call this the 4 A's: assess, attune, answer, and advance. First thing you have to do is you have to think about, well, what kind of question is this? First of all, what are they asking me about? Are they asking me about my team? Are they asking me about the market opportunity? Are they asking me about like my traction? Are they asking me about my fundraising chops? There's certain areas and buckets. So it's important to understand where that is, because you're going to use that later to flip it. And the second is this asking me about the big vision, or is it asking me about risk? The second thing is attune. Then you have to calibrate yourself as a founder, particularly if you realize that they're asking you prevention questions. You could get really defensive, you could get really demoralized, you could get really uncomfortable and angry. And but investors also fund people they like. So coming forward with confidence and being pleasant and delighting them, despite what kind of questions they're asking you, is going to help you create that connection with the investor. The second thing you have to do, you cannot be a sleazy politician and not answer the question that they're asking. So you always have to answer. Even if it's a prevention question, and they're asking you about the skills that your team is lacking, you have to say, well, currently, we are lacking this and this skill. But then as a final step, and as the biggest step, is you advance. Then you remember that you're asking about the team. So how can you really promote your team? So you can say, but the other thing that I want to mention is that our team has this skill and this skill and this skill. So you end up on a note of positivity, you end up on your vision, and you end up on how you're going to win big. So this is a framework. I'm going to quickly walk you over, and we just talked about this a little bit, but assessing is first figuring out, as I mentioned, the big area, and then thinking about, is this question making me defensive? Is this question, does it have the word risk in it? Does it have the word cost in it? Does it have the word retention? Does it have the word loss? There's certainly some words that can tip you off, but also think about the feeling that that question is giving you. Is it a feeling about, are you problem solving? Are you telling the investor, are you airing out your dirty laundry? Or are you telling them your big vision? And so that's how you know, and that's how you can really figure out, where are you in promotion land that's going to make you go towards the path of funding, or in the prevention land that's likely going to close down opportunities for you. This is very big. Attuning is that people, particularly, if you meet investors in person, what you say and the words that you use are only about 10-15% of what people see. They also see your body language. They see how you look at them in the eyes. They hear your tone. There's all these signals around us that make us come forward when we answer our question. So it's not just about flipping, but it's about your delivery. And so you need to take a minute after you've figured out what kind of question you have, what the question is all about, to calibrate yourself and make yourself big. Move your body language, shoulders forward, everything that feels comfortable to you, but that is your confident mode. And delight them, and be kind and be pleasant, because people only want to work with people that are pleasant. If you become defensive and aggressive, or even if you point out that they're discriminating towards you, it is true, and it's unfortunate that they did, but it's likely to also result in not a win for you. So step 3 and 4, I put these together because they almost come together and they should seem seamless in your mind. So you have to directly respond to the question. You have to make sure you know your numbers. So use data. Another bias that investors have, this is a positive bias, is investors love founders that know their numbers. If you know your numbers, investors are just biased towards liking you. So make sure that you've done your homework and you know what your gaps are, and you can spend a little bit of time there, but then take an opportunity and talk about the big vision around that area, whether it's your team, whether it's your market, whether it's your sales process, whether it's anything that investors can do. So these 4 things are ones that are going to help you succeed and do it seamlessly. But it's something that you have to practice. So I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to go through these quickly. I'm not going to read all of the text. I'm actually going to give you a minute, and then I'll talk about it. So this is a question as an entrepreneur that you will almost 100% get from investors. So how do you defend against competitors? First thing, you want to assess. So this defense, right? So already you know this is a prevention question. And it's making you feel like, how are you, bad things that will happen to you. What's your plan if bad things happen to you? So then you attune, you know your data, you know your numbers, and you talk about, you're playing in a market, but you've got 2 competitors. So say the truth. What are the competitors? And these they are. And then what are they doing? And then what are you going to do to defend against them? So you're going to lock in customers, for example, with annual contracts, or do this, or, what are your ways? For example, here, it's really what your plan against those 2 competitors is and how you will get ahead. But then when they're talking about competition, they're talking about like market in general, right? So you take an opportunity to advance your big vision about how you're going to position yourself as a leader, and what are your competitive advantages in the market, and what you hope to get and how quickly you hope to get it. So you don't just stop at answering the question about defending against competitors, but you talk about the big vision. Another one is, how will you be profitable? Assuming that maybe you won't, right? So this is a prevention question, because again, it's just looking at your company right now and that a small milestone against, how are you going to become just a super big business? Profitable is not something that's going to make investors money. So you could say, you probably know based on financial projections when you will become profitable, how many customers you need, and how much time it will take, etc. So you talk about that and you answer that, and you maybe spend about a little bit of time around that. But then you advance and you say, how are we just going to be a really big business that's going to make you money as an investor? It's not just about reaching profitability. We're actually we're going to become an amazing business with strong unit economics, with multiple lines of revenue, etc. And you end up on that advancing and positive note. So I'm going to stop. I did a lot of talking. I hope that was interesting, but I want to recap and say, this is the framework to respond. We've got prevention questions and really being able to distinguish between them, but it's the assessing, attuning, and this is the internal work, answering and advancing. So I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. And then the next part is going to be fun, because we're going to go into small groups and we're going to actually dig in and see how would we answer these. And, if maybe you have all accelerators in your group, then you can also talk about, how we can integrate this into our programming. So you can use your session, breakout session, any way that you want that is useful to you, to talk in small groups about what we shared. But I'm going to stop, and if you have questions, if you have reflections, if you have thoughts, and I see now that people have answered. And like Dora said, it's very similar to a job interview. So it's similar to a job interview. It's similar to investor Q&A. It's women get it 2 times more than men. But if you are a founder from a local market, I was recently talking to a founder that works in Nigeria, and when I shared this framework, they said, well, this Nigeria is seen as such a risky market that I always get prevention questions. And this is a useful framework to take and really kind of talk about the positives. So let's open it up. I want to hear your voices. And thank you for the feedback. I think it's interesting. What I want to do is take these studies from the academic realm and give them to people that let's do something about this. How do we change our programming? How do we change what we do? And I'm going to share this slides with the IntelliCap and the SANCALP team, and they can share this after.
Hi, thank you again, John. I hope I don't become too much of contributor here. I actually truly have enjoyed this presentation because I'm just starting out in my journey as a fundraiser for my organization, and I have gone through practice rounds with one of my colleagues, and one of the things that throws me off is questions that could come up when you're speaking to a potential funder. And it's so good that you've gone through this, especially on the assess, so that I'm able to capture specific words that would help me. And what I've gotten from this is prevention questions are more negative. They lie more on the negative side. And even if you get a feeling of defense, I mean, that's your area, that's where you are. And the other that's very important, and I'd like your advice, is when it comes to attuning, because sometimes when you're especially face to face with someone and they're abrasive or they're speaking really fast and they throw you off with a question, what are the things, what are the tools, or how can we calmly or discreetly attune ourselves, without looking like we are shaky or shaky leaf, or perhaps you can guide us on maybe how to go about it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I have some ideas about Attune, but I actually we're going to do some breakout sessions, and I'd love for you to go and talk to each other. And if that's the question that you have, is to discuss, what have you seen, what works, etc. And then maybe we can come back and then discuss in a group, what do you think are ways in which we can attune? Because first of all, it's personal. And two, it's again something that you have to practice. And it's, like some people actually take, they use like acting techniques to put yourself and pretend, in that mode of, and they project. Some people spend a lot of time with their emotions and processing the emotions and saying, this is not about me. This is not about me. This is about them, right? It's not that my business is bad, is that they perceive my business to be risky. So my goal and how I'm going to win is actually to dispel this myth for them. So those are, for example, two things. So those are two things. And I have a lot of these, so I'm going to share my LinkedIn. People can find, my name is Yona Rapishti, I'll write it. People can find me on LinkedIn, and I would love if people want to like connect. I have a lot of exercises for female founders about how you can, this is just about the Q&A with investors, but I have a lot of other ones, and I'm about to create some frameworks and share some tools, and I'd love people to use them more broadly. Because I think it's powerful. We can beat this, even if the system is biased. It's about being aware of what those biases are. Sometimes when we don't know, this is, I think, one of the big takeaways that I also want to say, and I was going to say it at the end, but I'll say it now since we also are live streaming, is that sometimes when people are treating you in biased ways, and this comes to the attuning part, is you come away and you think, I am not good enough. My business is not good enough. And it becomes about you. But when you know that they might even be doing it unintentionally, it's just trigger. We use mental shortcuts. And their response to you is just a system of this like accumulated norms as society that's going to take a long time to break. Then you don't come away feeling like I'm not good. You just come away being like, oh, if someone is driving towards me in a speed that might make us have an accident, I defensive drive and we avoid that accident. And that's what I want, is that it's not always up to women to change the systems, but as long as we live in these systems and there's tricks we can use to be defensive and to empower ourselves and to not fall prey to these traps, then we'll make progress. And we'll see that number that was 300 billion hopefully shrink over our lifetime. So Elizabeth, I would love to hear your comments. Are you there, Elizabeth? Yes.
So my experience has not been quite easy, I guess, because of the lack of exposure, even having such information. So it's quite an eye-opener because it looks to me from what you've shared, it's a bit like a courtship. You kind of have to be very careful how you come across and not be too much or too timid. I mean, it's quite a balance right there. And well, I think being an entrepreneur, I mean, there's a kind of a character that makes an entrepreneur. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. And because of just that ability to go out of your way and chart uncharted waters, knock on doors, sell to people things that they already have in their own homes, makes we're different pedigree. And for that reason, when sometimes I see when you come across people who, and sorry to say, but who are in employment, so you find like what I've
Yeah. And it's such a good point, like Elizabeth, it's like, how do you keep all of these things in your mind, right? It's like the data
can help you.
Yeah.
And there are those.
You're breaking up a little bit. Go ahead. Is it just me, or are we having trouble hearing her?
I think
she's breaking. I think she has a network problem.
Oh. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, maybe you can also write some of we're having trouble hearing you. I love the first part of what you were mentioning. It's so true, but we can learn these, and entrepreneurs, and the thing that I'm going to mention to Elizabeth's comment is that it's projecting, right? It's like sometimes we feel ashamed to ask things about us, right? It's like, well, I'm asking for money, they're funding me. But think about your mission. You're actually, a lot of you are working to change things and make things better for people through your organizations and through your businesses. So don't think about it. One way to, like a mental trick, is to say, I'm not asking for money. It's not about me. And I think Alem also mentioned that, but I'm asking because my business is awesome. And this is an opportunity, not just for me to make a difference and make a big difference, but for the investor to come in and also be part of this awesome cause. So that's one way that you can kind of reshift those patterns, so it doesn't feel shameful to ask, am I begging for money? Sometimes that's what it feels like, right? And so that's one of the things. You're not begging for money as an entrepreneur, you're giving them an opportunity. So yeah, you're making them an opportunity to invest and be part of this awesome. And if they don't want to, then step aside, because someone else will come to really build this big vision of how you will improve people's lives in healthcare, agriculture, etc. So yeah, Najima, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Oh yes, Najima here again. Don't get tired of me.
No.
Just add on to what you've said. From my experience, practice makes perfect. The first time you actually go and meet those investors, it's the first time you're doing it. You are not sure exactly what you're doing. You know what you want to do, but you quite haven't put the pieces together. So every single time you do it, you're going to find yourself getting better and better and better. And like you've said, usually when you find yourself in those tough situations whereby you're made to feel like, okay, now you're asking for our money, why do you want our money? It's always good to just let them know it's not about you, like what I usually tell investors, I'm like, okay, fine, the cause I'm fighting for is bigger than just me. This is not about me whatsoever. This is about there's so many lives that this is going to touch, blah 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 blah. So actually subsequently you won't be giving me money, but you'll be touching and changing so many lives, and you make them feel, share the dream, share your dream, share your passion. Let them feel like this is something that you truly believe. This is something that's bigger than just you. And when you're talking, avoid using words like I. We are going to change the world. We are going to change the neighborhood. We are going to do basically we. Yeah. And in that way, it won't feel like it's just an I, because then they will be right to ask, why should we give you our money? Because it feels like the money is being given to you. So sell something bigger. Sell your vision. Don't just sell a product. Don't just sell, we are going to, let's say, make fried popcorn, sell the number of people who won't go hungry because they're going to be eating the popcorn. Sell a bigger vision. And once you get them to start thinking and feeling the way you do, then yeah, you have them. But the previous speaker spoke of, I think, confidence and not knowing what to say. And all I can say is that it gets easier, it gets easier. And it's true, some people have this skill. Some people are naturally good at selling, they just start talking and you're like, yeah. And others don't have it. But it's a skill that you can actually acquire. And with practice, you can practice, you'll find yourself being able to sell even better than you thought you could. But like you mentioned, investors love numbers. Investors love entrepreneurs who understand their business to the core. So have your facts. Don't go and every single time they're asking a question, you have to get and start flipping, checking pages to just go back to remember what they're asking. Have your facts. When they're talking to you, let them feel like this is someone who actually understands what they're talking about. This is someone who sleeps, breathes, and thinks this business. And if we put our money here, definitely it's not going to be lost. So know your facts. Do not go for this. Do not go to meet investors unless you're 100% sure you have your facts straight. Because what actually makes investors doubt is when you start thinking and they're like, you see, I have to, they're like, there's a problem here. If this is the person, because the founder is supposed to be the visionary, supposed to know where the business is going. But if the visionary doesn't even know where the business has been or where the business wants to go, then there are problems ahead. So just have your facts, have the numbers. Most people don't like numbers, but if you choose the path of being an entrepreneur, it's something you can't avoid. You just have to take one for the team and actually learn to understand, learn to appreciate, learn to understand how numbers work and know your numbers. And the chances are it won't be as difficult as you actually think it is going to be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's like the questions are limited. They can only ask you so many questions. So write those lists, keep a list, practice, and then practice the shift. The other thing to think about, because I want to go back to like the mission is big and some investors are going to come because of the mission, but investors are not there for charity. So that's the other thing, is always remember that they have a profit motive. So when you advance, speak to what they care about, and they want to know, they only want you to get big because they want to make money off of you and make them feel like they're going to make money off of you. So don't forget, don't forget that the investor has to empathize with the story and has to believe in the mission. Otherwise, you don't even want them. But you also have to remember that they're not there for charity. And so everything you speak is to give them confidence that you're going to rock, as you're going to be like the best in their portfolio. So, okay, I think we might, we're going to do a couple of things. I'm going to just put you into breakout rooms, just about like 12 minutes, not that long, in groups of 3, so you can talk to one another. I'm going to give you a link to questions that you can practice, or you can just reflect and say, what does this mean for me? How am I going to make this different? So, and then we'll come back for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to talk about how it went in your groups, etc. So, and then I'm going to share my LinkedIn with you, and then I'm going to share another fun thing with you. So you can open this Google Doc. There is your framework. So this Google Doc already, the 4A framework is there. You can copy it. It's yours. You don't have the whole presentation, but the whole, so everyone can just click on this Google Doc, and then we can do that. But meanwhile, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you to the people that joined us live on Facebook, because they won't be part of this next step. And then I'm going to ask Maureen to help me and put everybody into groups of 3. And so people have a chance to reflect, or you can dig in and say, hey, I want to practice flipping a question. Can I get some feedback from the people on the team? So it's up to you to use the time in the way that's most useful. But thank you so much for your energy, for your feedback, and go into your breakout rooms, and then see you back in 12 minutes.
Perfect. Doing the breakout rooms now.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Hi, everyone. I hope you had some good conversations. And I think we are all back. Is that right? Okay, I'd love to hear what are some of your reflections? What did you talk about? What are some of the insights that emerged from the small group conversations that you just had? Gabriel, yes.
Oh, yeah. So the session was interesting, and what I've learned from using the four A's is that it is almost difficult to pivot from answering to advancing, because you have to keep your mind, you have to keep a focused mind. So from answering the question directly with facts, and then pivoting to now advance, that is probably where the challenge is, and one has to find a very good way of storytelling so that you can pivot that also professionally. But overall, it was very engaging, and probably I've learned that I'll be using the four A's, and also urging our team to be using the four A's, because probably we'll be pitching very many times this year, and we'll have to use that approach. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that it's useful. And it's true, right? It feels awkward. So even some transition kind of questions. And furthermore, it's important to think about our growth trajectory, or, like maybe even like pick that transition phrase that you want to really kind of make it feel that you're not like gaming the system, but it's just part of how you think as an entrepreneur. You think big. That's just where you go naturally. You don't have to let people know. But thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else? We've got just a few more minutes left, so maybe I will hear from one or two more comments.
I guess I can speak a bit. My name is Mary, and I think for me the takeaway was how to answer questions without being defensive, but to paint that big picture and be able to show the opportunity that's in that field. Because of the field that I practice in, there's usually a lot of questions that make me feel I have to go out and defend a lot of what we do and why, justify why we need to be funded. And so just knowing that there's even this difference to me was very useful. And so in our group, we discussed that. We also discussed a bit about how to be more prepared and to do a bit more background information of the investors, and that should help you in answering the questions.
Yeah, that's great. And you can almost anticipate what are the hardest questions and put a list and practice them with your co-founders or managers or friends, or other entrepreneurs. It's a great kind of way to be. So one thing, my LinkedIn is up if you want to connect. The other thing that I want to share with all of you is that I've been a lot of this thinking and a lot of the tools and the work that I've been building has been because I've been interviewing entrepreneurs, particularly female founders from all around the world. So I don't know if some of you are on Instagram, but I've built this channel that's called Global Scale Up X. And every week we share the story of one female founder and her business, and particularly her tips around fundraising and talking to investors. So whether you're, again, a man or a woman, it just has really good insights on how to talk to investors, how to approach them, and that whole process. And we also post kind of opportunities, so like accelerator programs, fellowships, etc., that can help you with funding and other opportunities or trainings, etc. So it's a great kind of community. If you are on a What's Up with other female founders and you think that they could benefit from this Instagram channel, please help me spread the word. Sometimes it's hard to get into those channels where the female founders are. And then finally, if you do raise money, I interview founders that have raised at least $100,000 in equity VC. But if you if you raise money and you also want to be featured on the Instagram channel, or you know someone that should be featured, then let me know and I'll interview and we'll do a profile of them. So thank you everyone. Today, the session wouldn't have been so much fun without all of your feedback and all of your engagement and like hands-on thinking. And I think it'll help me even further develop and build this framework. So thank you for joining, and I wish you to have fun in the other sessions at SoundCalp, and good luck with your fundraising journeys.